Welcome beyond the Reiki Gateway. I'm your host, Andrea Kennedy. Like countless others, Reiki found me when I wasn't even looking, and then it ignited a whole new world of questions. This podcast explores topics of interest for the spiritually curious. Join me for discussions and special guests on subjects such as past lives, crystal healing, spiritual awakening, ascension, energy healing, and more, all to assist and inspire you along your unique soul's journey. This episode is sponsored by Mainstream Reiki, offering live online Reiki classes and a membership community to help Reiki practitioners from any style or lineage succeed and grow their practice for themselves and professionally if they choose. Find out more at mainstreamreiki.com. Welcome to Beyond the Reiki Gateway. I'm your host, Andrea Kennedy, and today I am super delighted to welcome Cynthia Sue Larson. She's a quantum physicist, an author, and consciousness researcher who earned her physics degree from UC Berkeley. Known as the quantum optimist, she has dedicated her career to exploring the intersection of quantum physics, consciousness, and spiritual phenomena. Cynthia has authored several groundbreaking books, including Quantum Jumps and Reality Shifts When Consciousness Changes the Physical World. You may have seen Cynthia on the Discovery Channel, the History Channel, Coast to Coast AM, and the BBC, or presenting her work internationally at conferences on science, spirituality, and consciousness. And I just have to say, Cynthia, I'm so excited to have you here. I mean, this is so fascinating to me. So thank you for saying yes.
Oh, thank you, Andrea. I'm glad to be with you talking about my favorite topics.
Oh, I know. And I already used the word fascinating, but just to ponder these things, it's just, I don't know. I want to get started with our audience because what I'm surprised about is when I talk to people, so many of them are not aware of a certain thing, and it's called the Mandela Effect. And I was made aware of this several years ago, and what an astonishing realization this was for me. And it was really mind blowing. And then I didn't know what to do with it. So, for our audience, could you please describe for us what do we mean by Mandela Effect? And, maybe our listeners and our viewers on YouTube can relate to this in their own lives. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the definition that I would give, first of all, would be that the Mandela effect is collective alternate memories. And the reason I'm being selective about the choice of words here is that collective because it's a group of people, alternate because what's being remembered is very different than the official story and the official supposed history. And then the memories would be this collective awareness that people have that's quite different than what would be suggested if you did an internet search or pulled out some books or looked at anything, photographs even, all sorts of things now show a very different history. And it would be for things like if you watched I Love Lucy, you might remember you've got some splaining to do. That would be something her husband used to say, but he never said that. Or you might remember from The Wizard of Oz, the dialogue, fly, my pretties, fly, fly, fly. That was never in the movie. Never at all. Not edited out, just not there. You might remember the Publishers Clearinghouse delivering giant checks to people when they won that $1 million. And it was so exciting. Except that never happened because Ed McMahon never worked for Publishers Clearinghouse. He worked for some other company entirely. And he never delivered those huge, giant checks.
Okay, wait. I have to jump in here because I didn't know the Ed McMahon thing. And so I'm hearing that from you, and the other ones I was aware of. The splaining, like you've got splaining to do. I remember that.
I do too.
I remember that. That was Ricky,
Yeah.
and he would say that, and that was a big thing. But then to hear the Publishers Clearinghouse, I know that it was Ed McMahon, and he had the big check, and he would be at their front door.
Exactly. And there's so much residue where other people remember it too, including Johnny Carson. He presented Ed McMahon, who was on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. They were both there together, and he had a huge, frank, giant check to hand to Ed McMahon. But why would he do that if Ed McMahon never had anything to do with giant checks on people's front porches? So this is exactly where we're going with this Mandela effect. This is how big a phenomenon it is. And a lot of people, if they don't know about it yet, I hope that they find out or do some research to find out what it is, because it's possible. You can just do an exercise and go to a grocery store, for example. It's loaded with Mandela effects, all sorts of products, everything from Kit Kat, you know, if you remember the Stouffer stovetop stuffing, there's no such thing. Never was any Stouffer stovetop stuffing. It's only ever been Kraft stovetop stuffing. Haas avocados are now, if you remember, I'm pronouncing it the way I remember it. Haas avocados, Haas. Now they've only ever been spelled Hass, Hass. So just a grocery store adventure is extremely revelatory for most people who might be thinking, this is ridiculous. Really?
Yeah, what was the thing with Kit Kat?
Yeah, Kit Kat, it's got the hyphen or not have the hyphen. And so I remember the hyphen. A lot of these things just are strange and they seem irrelevant or small, or who cares about that? Now, the Ed McMahon thing seems kind of big. It's like, wait a minute, that affected people what about the people that won the $1 million? Did they not receive it? What happened? I mean, it just makes you wonder. And then the whole idea of the Mandela effect itself, that's named after Nelson Mandela, who some people remember passed away before ever making it to become president of South Africa. They remember he died in 1987 or thereabouts. And I talked to Art Bell about this on one of his late night radio shows. Art Bell was that famous coast to coast radio personality. And when I spoke to him about it, I actually said, you've got some splaining to do about reality, and I didn't go into that one. But we were talking about the Mandela effect years and years ago, before it really, right when it was kind of coming out with that name, Mandela effect. I was calling this phenomenon reality shifts. But to have a bigger term seems appropriate when we're looking at the fact that it's not just you or me or a small group of people noticing these changes, which would be extraordinary enough if we were doing a healing group and, for example, we all succeeded in reversing someone's terminal illness of some sort, which does happen. But now we're looking at something much bigger at a scale that's potentially affecting every human being on the planet when, for example, our kidneys are lifted several centimeters higher under the relative safety of our rib cage, for example, by the Mandela effect, by collective consciousness and the fact that now they've always been there. Even though I remember kidney punches, I remember putting my hands in my lower back like you would if you climbed a big hill or a bunch of stairs and you're resting. Kidneys are not down there anymore. They're now quite a bit significantly higher, to the point that when operations and surgery commences, surgeons go in through the front now, according to people that have been shocked to find out, like, I didn't used to have the surgery done that way. The doctor would go to the back. Now they're coming into the front. And I said, what are you doing? Checking my kidneys in the front. And they said they've always been there. So lots of things are changing or have changed.
So I'm a few minutes back. I'm still stuck on splaining and the check. So when you say Ricky Ricardo never said that, or Ed McMahon never did that, how do we know that? I mean, what do you look for? I mean, how do you come to that conclusion?
Yeah, this gets interesting. People have been doing research in this field ever since the term Mandela Effect came out, and even before then. I've been looking into this field since the 1990s, but people that refer to it as the Mandela Effect came in often in the 2000s. And so what they and I are doing is researching to see, let's see what we can find out. Let's check on a Google search. Let's check in the library. Let's go to, back when there was the Dewey Decimal System and you pull out the cards. I was doing that in the 1990s to research these things. Whatever kind of research you want to do is fine, including looking through your own personal recordings. Some people have a recording of maybe not the Ed McMahon checks, but definitely I Love Lucy. And you can go through those episodes, and you can go to fan websites, and you can look up, like, when does that famous saying that we all remember, when does it occur? And then you find out it never occurs, which is really rather shocking. Then how do we remember it so clearly? You've got some splaining to do. I remember the way he would say it. I remember the tone of voice, his expression, and you're thinking, oh boy. but now
Yeah.
it never happened. So, and that's an older one for some of us of a certain age. Also, so is the Ed McMahon one. Some of the
Mhm.
newer ones that people are noticing, it's kind of generational. So it's, I mean, in the sense that those of us who were paying attention to, for example, Nelson Mandela in the 1980s, we would notice, wait a minute, I remember the funeral procession. I remember worldwide grief. I remember an outpouring of love, and remembering, like, what a great man he was. And suddenly an awakening awareness from people around the world, like, this was unfair, his imprisonment all those years, and now he died. What a waste. How terrible. Not to mention the whole thing with his wife, his widow, Winnie, who, there was a little bit of a kerfluffle, or there was some conflict about her inheritance, and the estate was kind of in question. But if that never happened, if he never died in 1987 on Robben's Island, then why do we remember these details? So you can do that kind of research. You can look up, well, I mean, it's impossible. If he never died, then none of that happened. But you can find now, thanks to the internet, people like ourselves who also remember. I think it was 1987. I remember that. I remember it because of an anchor memory. This and that and the other were happening, and this is why I remember it. So it's very interesting to compare notes. But in terms of how do you research these things when they never happened now? Well, that's the starting point, is just noticing, how can it be that there's no more evidence that these things I remember so clearly never were the case, whatever it might be. And it's everything: geography, history, movies, products, you name it, physiology, anatomy, just about every single
Yeah.
category. Is,
Yeah, and underwear.
oh, yes.
Because you mentioned the term anchor memory, and so through my deductive reasoning, I figured out what that is, and I have that with Fruit of the Loom,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because that's a big one, and I mean, I don't know, it's big to me, I guess, because I have an anchor memory of when I was little, I asked my mother, "What's that brown thing?" I asked her because on the label, it has all the fruit or something, and when I was little too, they had commercials and the people would be dressed up like the grapes and stuff like that. I don't remember the cornucopia on the
I
commercials,
don't
but I
think, yeah, I
remember
don't think they had it
asking,
on the commercial. I
yeah. And then on the label, though, there's that brown horn looking thing. And I remember I asked my mother what it was, and she told me the cornucopia, and that it was, I remember feeling like, well, that didn't help because I didn't know what that was, you know? So, but then to hear about that this is one of those Mandela effects, that there was never a cornucopia in the label. And I have to wonder how many people listening to us right now are thinking back going, what? I remember that, right?
That's right. I remember it too. And a lot of people, that's how they learned the word cornucopia, which is a strange word. And notice that
Hmm.
we remember specifically the same thing. We're collectively having an alternate memory of a cornucopia rather than fruit on a dish or a plate or some other kind of basket with the handle, or maybe in some sort of a napkin, or, all sorts of things are possible. But instead of any of those
Hmm.
things, we're remembering the same thing together. That's interesting.
Yes. It is interesting. And you mentioned you've been looking into this for decades, and you've written books on this, and I I guess I want to ask you about what's happening then. I mean,
Yeah.
and I have so many other questions, but I mean, what's happening?
My take on it is, this is the most important topic for humanity right now. This idea that there is a possibility that we're having collective alternate memories. And the reason it's so important, and it's not yet known how important this is, it's not really on people's radar much, but I think it should be, and it deserves to be. And it's so important because it indicates that, just like we know with Reiki, anything can be changed. We can essentially experience another timeline, if you will. Imagine now that what if we can collectively tune in to another frequency, like via a frequency like Reiki? What if we can tune in to it collectively to another timeline, which is quite different, and we can collectively share the awareness across the experience of billions of people in the case of our anatomical changes to our body, which are happening, like the kidneys that I mentioned, because that's affecting every single human on the planet. These other examples might be collectively interesting to a certain society or a segment of the population, but the ones that affect everybody, that's huge. And that to me gives me great hope as far as the explanation of what's going on. I tend to lean on my background in quantum physics and look to see that we've got some analogous situations from the context of quantum physics where we would see a lot of the same types of miraculous occurrences that are, I'm calling it miraculous, where we're witnessing a change that's completely like a completely different timeline or a different state of being, which to me is very much like the many worlds of quantum physics being one and the same as the cosmological multiverse. So if we look at that, I'm just mentioning one possible explanation for quantum behavior. That would be the many worlds interpretation, such as Hugh Everett III first postulated, and then now there's many variations of that. But if you're looking at just that one possible interpretation and then recognizing now we're seeing movies that talk about the multiverse, like Everything Everywhere All at Once, that kind of thing, and a lot of the other movies that are coming out recently. But when we bring these two ideas together, the many worlds of quantum physics are one and the same as the multiverse, then instantly you can start seeing that the true nature of reality is consciousness. Therefore, you could say it's all like a dream, or you could say it's all a simulation. I like to use the word dream, but they're talking about the same thing. That means that we can literally change physical reality with consciousness itself. And again, we know that if we've welcomed Reiki into our lives and we've witnessed what Reiki is capable of doing for ourselves and others. And that's why I'm saying this Mandela effect, to me, is the most important topic right now for all of humanity, because it's inviting us and it's doing it in a playful way. Like, look at these fun little changes that are happening. Nothing too hurtful, nothing terrible. I know people get upset about things. They're like, I want my timeline back. You'll hear that. But if you really look at the entire scene from a big picture perspective, it's pretty exciting. And what an invitation. To me, it's inviting us. Ask the questions you truly want to hear the answers to, and you can start living those answers for yourself and everyone and everything you love.
Wow, that is really incredible. I'm wondering, you said this is playful, you know, and I mean, yes, but it can also be a little troubling, I think. Do people, sometimes have issues like that?
Yes, they do. We have conferences each year, and we've got the International Mandela Effect Conference just happened in Nashville, Tennessee. This year we had a PhD student who's now graduated, so he presented his research thesis, Charles Lobaito, and he talked about exactly this, the reactions that people have when they experience the Mandela effect. And it's not always sunshine and happiness and joy. There can be a lot of stress and some concern, and sometimes people get angry. And I've seen the same thing. I did a survey of hundreds of people and published those results in my book Quantum Jumps. It's one of the tables you can take a look at, and there's even a cute little graphic with a picture showing people with all their different responses. But when I did that, my research in 2013, and when Charles presented his work in 2024, 11 years later, pretty similar findings that for the most part, people are surprised. Sometimes they're shocked or angry, but that's not the majority of people, fortunately. There's a lot of curiosity, a lot of amusement, surprise, definitely. But I think what you're getting at perhaps ties into a sociological impact, and there are people also who've been studying the sociology of this, and hopefully we'll have a presentation on that at next year's conference. But when we see the sociological influence, it takes time for society as a whole to recognize, first appreciate something. I think the first reaction to change is often shock and kind of an attempt to dismiss it or push it away. And I think we're still going through some of that. Like, let's not talk about the Mandela effect. It's disturbing. It's like, I remember the giant checks and Ed McMahon or whatever it is we remember, Pikachu with the black tail, whatever the thing is. It's like, I would just want to keep that in my mind as that is the way it is. And we'll always have our memories. So, I mean, that may not be much conciliation for people who are feeling upset about it, but I think knowing that the memory matters and imagination matters, I think that's the gift here for humanity, to start looking at our memory of the past, looking at our imagination of the future, looking at the way we're navigating through timelines individually and together, and the way we do, the energy that we bring to this is how we do this. What kind of thought forms are we working with? What are we creating? Because those thought constructs have a permanence to them, and then they can start exerting influence in the physical world. So it feels to me like humanity's growing up. Huge invitation to wake up to, it's not just an individual me, but it's a collective we. So how do we enter into this grand cosmos with that awareness?
Yes. It is so timely, it seems like, and how it's been growing in awareness. I mean, we're doing this today. So there will be people out there who listen, and this is the first time they're hearing about this. And I have to imagine this is happening all around the world, which, you know, there's so many different directions to go with this. But for example, 500 years ago, this was probably happening. I mean, not with Kit Kat bars and things like that, but um, at that time, though, we weren't communicating with each other the way we are today. And so I would imagine the fact that we can instantly communicate with anybody anywhere in the world, how has that impacted the research into the Mandela effect, and where do you see that going?
That's a great question. And in my new book that came out this year, The Mandela Effect and Its Society, Awakening from Me to We, I've got a chapter in there about the history of the Mandela Effect. And I felt uniquely suitable for writing this chapter since I've been involved with the topic for more than 25 years, before it was even called the Mandela Effect. And I believe you're right. I'm sure this phenomenon existed not just 500 years ago, but thousands of years ago. But as the farthest I was able to trace it back would be more like 100 years ago, to Mary Rose Barrington from the United Kingdom, who was studying the phenomena, calling it just one of those things, jot. And it's sort of a comical, whimsical name for it. But she had a lexicography of like words that she used to describe things, walking about and coming back, comebacks and walkabouts and so forth. Um, where is it going, and how far back does it go? These are great questions. In my history chapter, I mentioned Carl Jung because I would like to give him credit for, I think, one of the earliest documented Mandela effect cases, when he visited the baptismal at Ravenna, Italy, with a friend, Tony Wolff, and the two of them were looking at mosaics in an octagonal room. So it was an extremely specific memory, and the mosaics were not small; they were like, I don't know, giant, like 6 by 8 feet large. There were four of them. So every other wall, there was a mosaic showing and depicting some beautiful scenes from like Moses crossing the Red Sea. There was a baptism scene. So these were all watery scenes having to do with spiritual topics. Anyway, long story short, Carl Jung was talking about this when he was viewing them with Tony Wolff. She remembers that. He remembered that. And later he started realizing, gosh, I should have gotten a postcard or something when I was there in the 1930s. So he contacted a friend, when you're going there, I know you're headed over to see the town of Ravenna. Could you just check out this baptismal and find a postcard for me? Well, his friend couldn't do that because, for one thing, the whole baptismal with the mosaics didn't exist. It wasn't there. But which seemed impossible to Carl Jung because he'd been talking out loud, just commenting, running commentary for like 20 minutes of the symbolism he was observing in each of the four scenes to Tony Wolff, who remembered clearly he'd been doing that. So I really want to give credit to him for that extraordinary situation. But the only reason we have that is because Carl Jung is famous as a psychologist and the father of the idea of synchronicity. So it's fitting, very fitting that this would have happened to him because he's looking at consciousness, he's looking at these weird things, and of course he would be willing to experience that. And I think he gets credit as one of our first, obviously, Mandela Effect observers in history. Where is it going in the future? Philip K. Dick is another experiencer, and I'm mentioning him now because he does like to look at the future. So it's funny. He's in the past. He had his great famous speech in Metz, France, where he was describing what sounds like the Mandela effect. He was describing you might walk into a room and you're reaching for the light switch and it's not where you know it is. It's moved or something. Your muscle memory, motor memory is different than what now fits the physical space. So he was saying that this is the kind of thing that could happen when reality is moving around, when he talks about orthogonal time and orthogonal space. And that's a great way to look at it. It's like these parallel possible adjacent realities are right there. The speech he was giving in Metz, France in 1973 was about if you find this world bad, you should see some of the others. So I mentioned this in that chapter on the history of the Mandela effect, as well as the Carl Jung experience. And then when I look at where is this all going, the reason I'm mentioning Philip K. Dick is because he was a futurist. He did like to write science fiction about all sorts of things, including ideas where there are these parallel realities. And to me, where this is going would be a beautiful, beautiful golden age for humanity. Remember, I'm a quantum optimist. That means I'm a radical optimist. So I believe that when we learn to start asking questions we as humanity genuinely need, long for, and desire to see, but the questions we ask nature, we're going to get those answers. That is the way the participatory universe works, according to physicist John Archibald Wheeler. I believe he's right. So that means if we're asking how good can it get, we're going to start learning how to instantly get answers to the most insoluble problems humanity's been facing. And that means this is great news. So it means no matter how bad things may seem, kind of like that title of the talk from France, if you think this world is bad, you should see some of the others. Well, as a radical optimist, I'd like to say, how good can these other worlds get? Let's find out. Let's go there. And this is super exciting time to be alive, to recognize that you don't need to automatically adopt an expectation of like what's going to happen next. These two bad things have happened. They come in threes. I'm just mentioning this as a way that humans have learned to think about things. We can retrain ourselves. You can say, okay, these two things seem bad, but now we're ready to find out how good can it get. And we're going to bring that challenge in, that question. We're going to need to know the answer. We're going to demand to know the answer. We're going to expect to see that answer. And we're going to do that collectively. So what does that mean? It means that we can start experiencing global miracles. No sooner do we see something that looks like it's going wrong than, oh, good thing this came along. This, like, for example, we've got plastic in the ocean and it's an island as big as a landmass. Good thing we found some bacteria and some living organisms that love to digest that stuff, and they're already working on it. And then somebody might say, well, the whole planet's going to heck in a handbasket. It's having a electromagnetic field collapse. Good thing we've noticed that, so we can bring in some sound waves and Reiki healing for the whole planet. We can raise those levels back up. We can have a soft landing into the fifth world that the Hopi have predicted that we're going into.
Wow. I say wow a lot, but wow, did I really mean that one? I want to ask you about, because we're starting now to really get into this realm of timelines and different realities and things like that. When we talk, though, about the Mandela effect, to take a step back, and we gave some examples like the cornucopia thing, or, maybe there's a movie, with, I read your book and I remember the thing about Moonraker, right? The end of that 007 movie. And and for people who are wondering what I'm talking about, Jaws, right?
Yeah.
That's the character's name. And he has all this metal in his mouth, and that's why he has the name Jaws. But um, at the end of the movie, Can you explain the difference in memory that people have in that one?
Yes, there's a young lady in the film. So Jaws is this giant guy. He's kind of scary looking because he's played by an actor who really is a giant human being, very large man. And so he's kind of scary to look at. But then with this mouthful of metal teeth, it was terrifying. And so a lot of us remember a scene in the movie where there was the young lady who had a mouthful of braces, and she'd been kind of shy to show her smile. But she was just sitting down next to him, and they were sharing sort of a magical moment, an enchanting kind of comical moment where she looked at him, and then I think he smiled, and then she smiled, or I forget who smiled first, but she had this mouthful of teeth that were all shiny and metallic because of the braces. And Jaws had that mouthful of teeth that were, of course, metallic and kind of scary. But in that moment, it didn't look so scary. And it was like, oh, that's sort of a sweet moment. It was goofy and a little bit silly and a little bit romantic. It was just funny, a little bit over the top. So that's what a lot of us remember. And then so that when they had this budding relationship, the two of them kind of made sense. Like, well, they both have teeth and a mouthful of metal and they're misunderstood. People get scared and so forth. But now, that movie, now, every version of it that I've heard of only shows that the young lady had just regular teeth with no braces, no metal whatsoever. And now her character's name was Dolly in the movie. So Dolly now just has regular teeth. And it's weird to see the same scene playing out, but without the braces, it doesn't make this as much sense as it used to make. And why would we all remember that she had braces? Why would we have such a clear memory of such a specific thing once again? So it seems like, okay, collectively, we have an alternate memory. And what we're saying is that memory is correct. We have that memory. That timeline exists. We did experience that. We do remember that.
So, my question then is, if somebody had the James Bond movie, The Metal in the Mouth, if they have that and the cornucopia thing, do we all have that in common? So if I meet another cornucopia person who's like, no, there was a cornucopia, do they also have that same memory of the 007 movie? Do they come in batches? Hello, it's Andrea. And in addition to being your host here at the podcast, I'm the founder of Mainstream Reiki, where bringing Reiki further into the mainstream is my mission. I offer quality Reiki classes of all levels to students attending live from around the world. And I've built a membership community as well to help Reiki people connect with each other through discussions, events, and Reiki practice. So if you're considering learning Reiki or you already have, I invite you to visit mainstreamreiki.com to discover resources and perhaps your next step along your Reiki journey. Thank you. And now back to the show.
They might. So far, from everything I've seen, we haven't really found, not that I'm aware of, have we found communities of like we match, like this group of us remembers the same Mandela effects, but not these other ones. Like we remember there used to be a yellow sun and now it's a white sun. We remember the Ed McMahon check and so forth. So what tends to happen is most of them will be shared, but then a few will be not shared. Some of them will say like, well, Nelson Mandela, he never died in prison. He was always alive. I don't remember that one at all, but they'll remember some of the others, and that is part of this phenomena. It's just like baked right into it. It's very much part and parcel of the way the whole thing works, is that our subjective, unique, personal memories can be quite different than pretty much everybody else. And that seems to be more the norm rather than you found your tribe, your group. Like this is your little special niche where you've got the same exact timeline changes observed. Like you've always been moving perfectly in sync with this, like a school of
Right.
fish or a flock of birds.
Yes.
But we're not seeing that so much. So the coherence you might expect. It's a great question because that's a really good question. And it similarly, we have looked. There are people that have been looking at what do the experiencers in general have in common. Now that's
Mm.
interesting because we do notice that there are some similarities and some shared qualities, typically involving things like having a little bit of a distrust for authorities telling us how to think and what to, believe in. We tend to, those who experience this tend to be a little bit more independent. We also tend to be intuitive feelers on the Myers-Briggs interest inventory that you can take for free on the internet. So that would be the first, there's like a 4-letter designation. So it would be an extrovert or an introvert. That doesn't matter too much. The next one is intuitive. And then the third one would be feeler. And if those two are there, then it's a minority in the general population, but more of a majority of the Mandela affected and people noticing these shifts in reality. And that's really interesting. So it seems like the empaths, the intuitive feelers, the ones who are capable of holding a sense of who we are at different levels of conscious agency, in other words, and you can kind of look at yourself and see yourself from the spiritual being. You can look at the egoic daily Cynthia, and I can also hold, and then I can jump to be the spiritual, eternal, infinite Cynthia, and I can do that as a meditation. And so people that do that, they're going to notice a lot more Mandela effects.
They're noticing, but people who aren't intuitive, they're not feelers, they're really oblivious to this kind of thing, are they still moving through timelines? They're just not aware?
They can, if you, I've done, when I did a survey of people of all these different Myers-Briggs types, some of them are not intuitive feelers at all. And some of those that are not also do experience the Mandela effect. So it's not a hard and fast rule. So just because someone's impervious to empathy, it doesn't mean they can't experience the Mandela effect. It just means it's less likely for them to do that. But it's possible still.
But if they, I guess my question is, are people coming along on a shifted timeline that will never recognize that they have had that effect happen?
Well, I think this whole
It's
phenomenon is
just,
getting us to look at the difference between the eternal, infinite being, the spiritual nature that we have, and the mortal, physical limitation, measurable self, the egoic, day-to-day person in a body, meat suit person. So when we start looking at these differences, to me, that's what the true, another one of the big gifts of the Mandela effect seems to me to be, is noticing that everything on this physical level is like a dream. So you really can ask questions because your true identity really is consciousness. It's not the meat suit. It's not the physical human body egoic self that's mortal and one day will die. No, you are the eternal infinite consciousness. And so this phenomena is a huge invitation. It's a very subtle one, but to me, it's a very powerful invitation to just to get us to notice, like, who are you really? And to get us to wonder about these questions. Which timeline am I on? What if you are the eternal infinite being? You're the one that jumps through the timelines. So you're the one who's infinite. You're the one who's eternal. And then the memories you have and the imagination you share, that's just the fun you're having on laying down a train track of the timeline of your life. You're creating that train track as you go. And those of us who are on that train and starting to understand, we're all infinite, eternal beings. We're experiencing a very different reality than the reality of those who are just right next to us, who don't see the miracles and the Mandela effects that we're noticing.
so are we existing in all the other timelines that we might have been on? Are we still there?
I think to the degree we're invested in it, we are there. So if we're not invested in it, like I choose not to be invested in timelines where I myself might have become distracted with the 7 deadly sins or the Buddhist hundreds of Buddhist torments. So I'm choosing to bonsai my timelines and just like snip, snip, cut, cut. I don't care to be there. I don't need to see that or live that or do that kind of damage to others. So I'm going to just jettison those right out of my life. And if we do that consciously, then I can say with some certainty that I'm not in those timelines. I'm not participating, and consciously so. But the other ones, if I can do some good, if there's some version of me that can be helpful to another, then sometimes I actually witness this as bilocations. And I do mention that in my new book about the Mandela effect. my own weird experiences, because I think they're instructive. And I think it shows us
Yeah.
that if I can do it, and if quantum particles can do that, and they do, there's bilocation is something that you'll see in quantum phenomena. And I've experienced it in my own personal life where I've been daydreaming something and people have seen me in exactly what I was daydreaming. And this is really good news, again, for those of us who are choosing to be of service in the world. And it means we can be many places at once. Sometimes we wish we could. It looks like we're going to get to see it in our lifetime for a lot of us, just with the awareness that what if these things are possible? What if it's true? We can start to experience it. Because you're asking, where can this Mandela effect go? It can actually lead to our rediscovery of our human quantum superpowers, if you will, that we can bilocate. We can be quite psychic and quite, tuned in. We can receive information instantly. We can experience multiple timelines to the degree that we wish to. From my own perspective, it's kind of like these other timelines are daydreams, but to other people, it was quite real. Like, and they might notice, where did that person come from? Just when I needed help, it's like an angel appeared. They helped me, and then they were gone. Yes. And that's the kind of thing we can do. And that's the kind of things that I believe is happening for all of us right now. And so I'm just fortunate to be able to be observing it and looking at just the right part of reality, right when it's coming on stage and more of us are finally able to partake of it. It's not just shaman anymore. This is becoming available to all of us.
Oh, can you speak a little bit more about that? Because I am sure many of our listeners and viewers meditate and they're exploring consciousness and their own ability to push the envelope and to learn more and to be more, quite frankly, in their life and make a difference. So many people want to make a difference. And I'm wondering, you mentioned you gave some examples in your book about some of these things. Could you share some of that for us, to make it a little bit more, uh, so that we could wrap our heads around what that actually might be like?
Yes, sure. Well, to begin with, just knowing that if you can, for example, bilocate, what if you could be not just resting comfortably in your bed on a cold morning like I was one winter morning, but you could also simultaneously, unbeknownst to myself, I was actually doing this, walking down the hallway on that cold morning, opening the door to my daughter's bedroom, telling them, rise and shine, time to wake up and get ready for school, opening a heavy window shade curtain that was too heavy for them to lift at their young age. And they would never do any of these things. They wouldn't wake themselves up, turn the light on, or they were physically incapable of opening that heavy window shade. So I'm just daydreaming about all that, like we sometimes might do, but still cozy in my bed. And then strangely, I hear little voices from down the hall. And then I hear their door opening. I'm thinking, wow, this is the first. They never wake themselves up. That's weird. And then there's like a voice like, Ma, and then another Ma, and then a pitter patter of little feet coming my way. And then they poke their head into the door, like, what are you doing back in bed? And I said, what? What do you mean back in bed? And at that point, I'm thinking, what are they talking about? Why are they up? And I said, you've seen me? They said, yes. And now I'm really a little confused. So I walk down the hallway, look in their room. The window shade is all the way up. It was just the three of us in the house. The doors are locked. Nobody else is there. And the lights on. They're awake. I know, but I know that that's what I was daydreaming. That was one of a couple of occasions when I've been witnessed bilocating. I'm sure it's more than that because I often have very real dreams where I'm often helping people. I would love to be of help too. I love that. I love to ask, how good can it get? How good can I get? How God can it get? How God can I get? So I'm calling that in. That means I'm of service. And I've had night dreams, which were someone else's nightmare apparently. And I feel like I just keep going through iterations of for me, it's like a dream. It could be their life. Like I'm just showing them, okay, you're in a dark, you're walking into a dark, it looks like a parking garage. You're a little bit nervous. Yeah, you probably shouldn't be going down here, but you're going down here. And so we just keep revisiting the cycle of events and changing them. And it's like I'm helping that person learn. You can timeline jump. if you get a weird feeling, you don't have to go down there, or you can change the circumstances. And that's the kind of fun thing that we're all capable of doing. Even if you just think all I'm doing is daydreaming, Cynthia, I don't know if it's working. Just keep asking, how good can it get? You can also do like I do, how good can I get? And what that means is you're calling the ability to be of good service into yourself, and you'll get to experience it. Maybe just in the daydreams, maybe just in it might feel like imagination, but I'm telling you, this is real. And there are reports of people who say, someone just popped into my reality right when I called for help. I don't know who they were or how they got there. They just sort of walked in. They helped move me and my child to safety, and then they were gone. It's like, I don't know what happened, but that's the kind of thing that's happening all the time. What if that is us? And I believe it is.
That's really phenomenal because people do report those kinds of things all the time. And I think in my reality, at least this current one, um, it'll be explained like an angel came, like a spiritual being, but isn't that us too? As we're spiritual beings.
Yeah,
So
exactly. I think your audience is perfect for this. The ones who are, they know about Reiki, they're practicing it, they're working with it. So already these are earth angels in disguise, basically.
it takes me back to something you said earlier about the questions. This idea that if we will just ask the questions, the answer will come. This is fascinating to me to talk to you because I've been telling people for I don't know, years. I can be pretty intuitive, and they'll when I do Reiki or anything really, but they'll say I want to be more intuitive. How do I do that? And I've been saying, and I don't know where I got this, but maybe on some other timeline, but I would say to them, ask a question because everything's energy. And when you ask the question, you are activating the answer energetically, and then you receive that. And so, how would you improve that? What else can you put on that, that we might find interesting? Because I think this is super powerful.
Well, you can add how good can it get to everything. It's like my favorite allspice. So you can say, how good can it get when I ask questions? How good can it get when I interact with reality? How good can this whole process get? So you're just putting that invitation into it to create this improvement cycle. In other words, taking it onward and upward, onward and upward, onward and upward to higher and higher. You could call it angelic levels, just a higher level of conscious agency and closeness to that, the wisdom of the absolute. So you're bringing it closer to that attunement and that alignment with all. And through that process, I love what you're doing. You're just already on the right track, just saying, ask questions. The only thing I'd add to it is just ask the questions that you genuinely desire, need, long, and love to live the answers to. So if you're asking only the questions that you would love to live the answers to, you're perfectly on track. The chaos occurs when people ask questions they have no interest in living the answers to, and then it's just like head over heels. It's just a tumble, and it's not the end of the world. Hopefully, live and learn. Like, okay, that went sort of sideways. But there's so much that can be learned and explored even in those moments. I had a moment like that this last year because I was doing some research as a participant in an Institute of Noetic Science experiment conducted by Dr. Dean Radin, the sigil experiment for magicians and meditators. He wanted to find out if people who receive a little interferometer, it's like a double slip device that it's similar, different, but it's the interference of two patterns of waves. So, like, the interference would be between photonic energy, like the way of the path of a photon interfering with itself. And so he constructed 50 of these little boxes, put out the call to tens of thousands of potential participants, selected just 50 of us, and then instructed us to do 10 actual runs with the device. The mistake I made was on one of the runs, I thought, well, this is going so well. I'm getting such good results. I'll make it even better. Okay, but this is funny because what I thought I would do, this is the part that, see, mistakes are great. When you're tumbling and falling off the road, you can learn a lot. And I think I learned a lot more from that one mistake, because that mistake taught me, because what I thought I'd do is like, okay, it's doing so well. I've got my Kundalini energy rushing. That's what I was doing successfully. I was actually humming and sort of singing a tone, don't be in coherence with the device, and it was working beautifully. And I thought, I'll just go into Kundalini state in advance before I even come into the room with the very sensitive device that needs like 40 minutes with you sitting silently next to it. I thought, I'll just do this prep work in advance. It turns out the prep work in advance contributed to a completely disastrous actual run, because when I pushed the button, yes, this is an actual run. There's no getting out of it. Even though I could see, like, oh no, this is clearly not working. And the funny thing is, why was it not working? And I think the big question, that's a good question, and maybe I'll still learn the answer to that. But one of the reasons I don't think it was working was because I was not in that moment. I did pre work, I was preparing in
Mm.
advance instead of being right there with it, moving exactly where it's going, bringing that humming, singing tone exactly where it is. I'd brought the Kundalini up in advance with the obviously mistaken concept that I could be in a different space time environment and affecting something that's in a whole different state and phase of being. I think this is good news. It means when you're called to help someone with Reiki or do whatever kind of prayer or assistance that we're doing, be in that moment, just be yourself. And that's the best assistance you could possibly provide. Often, a lot of us, including myself, would have thought, oh, I should have prepared. If only I'd known, blah, blah, blah. You've got that nonsense monkey mind going. I think this is very good news for all of us. You're perfect just as you are in that perfect moment. Just bring your love, your heart, your coherence, just care for the others. Bring that high level of frequency and healing energy. Man, it's choking me up here, feeling it. This is powerful. So it's a huge message for all of us.
Oh, it is. It reminded me too, recently I needed to do a presentation and um, my human self was on my case, you need to prepare and you need to work on this and you haven't been doing it. And, I didn't enjoy that. And anyway, I ended up procrastinating. And then it was not long before the presentation. And I sat down and I did some things, to prepare. But I have to tell you, I am best when I'm just right there, in the moment, and I present what comes in. And I think it's has to do with who's attending. What is their state of mind? What questions are they asking? Because it could be those answers that they're asking for come through for me to tell them. And if by preparing and writing something out beforehand, you miss that opportunity to connect on that energetic level with them, so it isn't just about delivering certain words, or certain ideas that you've written out ahead of time. There is this exchange. There is uh, far beyond just the words spoken and the ears receiving, the sound waves. There's something else going
That's
on.
I think
Um,
part of this is that what the indigenous wisdom traditions teach us, which is it's all the relationships, or it's our relations, it's the plants, the animals, the other people, and 7 generations forward, 7 generations back, feeling the depth of that true relationship is so important, and it's far beyond what we might think we could measure or pre-plan or prepare for. Those become like cogs in a machine, and I think this mechanistic worldview, hopefully, I think we're at a crossroads right now with humanity, looking at, are we going to mechanize everything, or can we be in relationship to everyone and everything? And how, I would add, how
mm,
good can it get when we make our choice at this crossroads? Because we're looking at two different, the transhumanist sort of so-called agenda, or what I call rev humanism, returning to like true human relationships, which would be with nature, the plants, the animals, the minerals, all of the seasons, and all of our generations going forward, and also back through our ancestry, recognizing that we are connected. we might think we're detached, we might feel like we're alone, but are we really? And I think just being in nature that can open our eyes up. How good can it get when you're feeling like things feel terrible? But if you lie down on the earth and just feel that you can soak in that energy of that earth mother, some amazing, miraculous changes can transpire.
In that moment. Yeah, the now moment. It's so powerful. Thank you so much, Cynthia. I I had one other thing really that I wanted to ask about, and well, about 27, but for interest of time, I want to ask about what about personalities and relationships. There was a, a woman that I knew years ago, and she said one day her husband, it was just like he completely changed. And we had a discussion about it, and there are potential, I guess, answers as far as walk-ins and things like that in the spiritual community. But what comes to my mind to ask you about is people. So the Mandela effect, we've talked about these other sorts of effects, logos, brands, movies, things like that. But what about people? Is can that happen to people?
Oh gosh, yes. The I mentioned the International Mandela Effect Conference, and the father of that organization, which is a 501c3 nonprofit, his name is Jerry the Dark Wolf Hicks. And at our first gathering in Sun Valley, Idaho, Jerry mentioned that his first introduction to this Mandela Effect was when a whole group of his friends had like musical chairs with their personalities. I
Mm.
know it was just crazy for him to look at it. Like, how did they all just change their personalities? It's like, the quiet one is now loud, and the depressed one is cheerful and buoyant, and like, what's going on here? And it was stunning to him. It was unmistakable and kind of shocking. And it was one of those things you just look at it like, what the heck is going on? So there has been an observation of this, and in my firsthand reports that I've been collecting through my website for over 25 years, a lot of them have to do with this personality change, where it's really noticeable for people that go on a vacation and then they come back, because then there's been like a distance of time, like months or so forth. That's much more likely that people will notice, like, whoa, this person or these people are completely different. And you might put that to just ascribe it to, well, you've been gone for a while, and people change, but not this much. Not where it's like a core change. And like you said, there can be a spiritual explanation, like maybe it's a walk-in. Could be. In any case, it also fits this whole Mandela effect with timelines and such, because there could be, whether you believe in walk-ins or not, that could have occurred where a person just feels like, that's it, I'm out of here. I've got no more use for this life. And then there's another spirit just like saying, like, I'd like to be here. This is the most exciting time to be on the planet ever. And then they jump in, but their personality is completely different. You could also say maybe that person is literally different in these different timelines. Any and all of the above possible explanations might do. In the case where Jerry Hicks noticed his friends played musical personalities, to me that's funny. Like, is that a new game? Wow. Because we tend to assume that the egoic personality is it's not necessarily static, but it's sort of semi-solid. And so it's shocking to see people changing so much. But over the last several years, since 2020, we have seen a lot of personalities changing, and there are lots of theories as to what's going on. But I think the Mandela effect, or this idea of timeline changes, is a perfectly valid runner in terms of explaining, this could be happening. People might literally be, or you, the observer, are noticing that they are now a different person than they used to be. So this is a very subjective kind of a situation. Um, and that's the key also to like I said earlier, each of us is noticing a different collection of Mandela effects, because subjective reality is really at the core of reality itself. So each of us is, it's kind of like we're noticing a world and a truth and a reality that's very much tailored to our own questions, our own observations, our own experiences, it can have something in common with what other people are noticing. But we don't need to expect it's identical for everybody because it probably isn't. And there is a physics coming up talking about this. It's kind of brand new. It has to do with these so-called Wigner bubbles, which are on the cover of my new book. Basically, it's showing reality bubbles, or in physics, that they're called Wigner bubbles, named after Eugene Wigner, the physicist. And the gentleman that came up with this terminology is the physicist Eric Cavalcanti, whose physics papers are starting to win awards. So he hasn't yet won the Nobel Prize. He's a front runner, but he's looking at this Copernicanism, which is noticing that our subjective observation of reality totally changes everything around us. It's very real. And some of us are sharing those observations as well.
It sounds like this is advancing and I'm going to say gathering attention and energy, attention and energy, and people are noticing, it seems like, right?
Yes. And that's a good thing.
And yeah, and is this how you're seeing the transformation of humanity? I mean, I just feel like, and I get the sense from listening to you that I'm thinking you would agree this is the most exciting time to be on the planet. Do you agree with that?
I do. I feel like finally my life makes sense, and all these weird aspects and strange experiences I've had. Boy, I finally feel like I fit in. And it's taken decades to feel that way. Yes. And what an exciting time to be alive. Just to notice that our thoughts and feelings absolutely, literally change the world. We know that now. We're seeing evidence from scientific experiments validating that two observers at the same place and same time can actually observe two completely different things. This is that Wigner effect. It's the observer of the observer. So the experiment I'm mentioning now, it's mentioned I describe it in my book, but it was a 2019 publication of a collaboration between physicists in Edinburgh, Scotland, and the University of Vienna, Austria, working together in collaboration to do, basically the double slit experiment with 6 entangled photons and 2 observational devices. The proposal was that Eugene Wigner would say that if you're observing another observer, you can actually have these observers at the same place seeing two different things. We are seeing that with the Mandela Effect. And that is exactly what they observed with that experiment. So that was proof in 2019 that two observers at the same place and same time can see two different things. And that means that one person can be observing a disaster unfolding, like the Schrodinger cat in the box is dead, but the observer of that first observer can say, not so fast, because I'm doing my Reiki thing, and I'm asking, how good can it get? I'm holding that high frequency in this moment, entangled with this whole observational device, and I see the cat's alive. And so we're in this extraordinary moment, which I never thought I'd see in my lifetime, but I'm so glad that I am, because it means that there is this fusion right now between the spiritual, between the scientific, and it's starting to make sense why we're here looking at crazy things like this fork in the road with transhumanism, and which way is humanity going to go? And we know we're going to go in the direction of how good can it get for all of us.
I'm with you. I am with you, Cynthia. Oh, this has just been enlightening and wow, what amazing things to be able to now think about and ponder and reflect on. So thank you so much for being here. And for our audience who wants to find out more about you and all of these topics in your research, in your books, where can they find you?
My website's the best place to go, and that is realityshifters.com, because we're all shifting reality. So it's all of us, it's a collective. And if you go there, then you can sign up for my newsletter, which comes out for free once a month with firsthand reports of people experiencing the Mandela effect, reality shifts, quantum jumps, all this kind of good stuff, as well as all the other news that's happening in my life that I'm sharing. And I think it's just a fun way to catch up and be reminded that we're much more powerful than we think we are. I also have links on my website to my YouTube channel and Twitter and Facebook and other places on social media that I'm often frequenting.
That's great. That is great. Thank you so, so much. And how great would that just be to read more about these things that people are noticing? And I think there's such power in that, because if we will learn and access what's happening for other people, it just sets something else in motion, I think, for us as individuals, because then it widens our view or our uh, uh, ability to welcome in new things, more things, go further in what we think is possible. And it's just so exciting.
It is super exciting. Thank you so much, Andrea.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for listening, and you can check the show notes or visit the website beyondthereikigateway.com to find out more about the podcast and connect with me. Please keep in mind that views and opinions expressed in the show don't necessarily reflect those of the podcast or anyone affiliated with its production or advertising. This program is presented for your entertainment only, and all information provided is to be utilized at the listener's own discretion. I, along with the BTRG team, hope you enjoy the show as much as we enjoy making it for you. Wishing you highest blessings until we meet again beyond the Reiki Gateway.